It's good. Yeah.
It's always interesting to hear.
Exactly.
Right?
For our
To
dinner.
share our happiness.
So I'm sitting down.
I like it. I'm sitting here like
It's like a lap dance or what? It's probably the rest. Is it? Can I have a
Group Legal and Compliance and Company Secretary of
The Honourable Chief Justice of the Republic of Fiji, Honourable Anthony Gates, the President of the Fiji Law Society, legal practitioners, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me much pleasure to be here this morning. I, in fact, do not intend to make a long speech, nor do I necessarily have a written speech as such, but I wanted to provide some food for thought in respect of the topic or the theme of your conference, which says the law, profession or business. Balancing the scales. I would say that actually there perhaps should have been a question mark after business, because you have profession or business, and I think that is probably has been a perennial question, if you like, for lawyers, whether being a lawyer is actually a profession as such or whether it is a business. We cannot necessarily take a very dichotomous approach to this sort of analysis, and indeed the legal profession in itself, because you would venture to say, and I would propose to you, that it's actually a combination of both. We have seen throughout many years of practice of lawyers in Fiji, and I'd like to probably elucidate further on that, that sometimes because there is a dichotomous approach to it, people do get caught out by the fact that they've taken a dichotomous approach. They either treat it purely as a profession and neglect the business. Some, of course, purely treat it as a business and then forget the professional side of being a lawyer, or barrister, solicitor, as we say. I think, ladies and gentlemen, the issue about the legal profession being a profession as such, what some people have actually termed is a symmetrical nature of the legal profession. The reason why it is asymmetrical is because of the fact the knowledge, the training, the specific technical training you do receive as a lawyer is very, very different to what the common person has or knows or indeed has lack of when they come and see you as a potential client. It is for this very reason, when you have these asymmetrical relationships between the client and the person that's going to deliver the service, there needs to be certain checks and balances in that respect. And indeed, one of the checks and balances, as said by common law, of course, also, is the fiduciary duty that you have as a professional person to your clients. Indeed, you have certain responsibilities to the court in itself because of the fact that you hold a particular level of knowledge, a particular level of technical knowledge, a particular level of expertise that others do not. Indeed, if you look at the history of the legal profession, we of course come from the common law system. If you look at the common law system, those people who were the advocates of the law, the barristers, I mean, these were people supposedly, or in fact they were, if my English history is correct, of the noble gentry. They were of the noble birth. This is why the cloaks that you wear today, those who appear in court, in the High Court, and you wear those cloaks, if you see at the back of it, it's actually got a pocket. And that pocket, of course, now is sealed, but those pockets used to be open. And so if you had somebody advocating for you before the Lords regarding your case, then I would come along and put some money in that pocket, because it would be above the person who's advocating for you to actually touch money, because money was not the issue. Of course, today those pockets are sealed, but I know many of you have other pockets that are actually open. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is actually the history of the legal profession. And I've actually set out, I had to actually put this out specifically, about the various responsibilities that you have actually as a legal professional person in respect of your duty to the court. The need for you to be able to be completely upfront with the court. And of course, I'm sure you've got sessions on that, the Honourable Chief Justice. You're talking about things like etiquette. Of course, there used to be indeed a very strict pecking order also. Very, very basic things like when you appear, when you're at the bar, who actually sits at the bar? Of course, some people would say that that tradition is now gone. People generally knew, and there used to be actually a distinction between Suva and Lautoka. The lawyers in Lautoka would exactly know which lawyer had how many years worth of experience. And based on this seniority, they'd be the ones sitting at the bar and the junior ones would be sitting at the back. Of course, Suva, I think, does not actually do that anymore and probably stopped doing that a long time ago. Many countries in the world, of course, very strictly adhere to that. Of course, one may argue and say that perhaps it is a good system to have because it lends to a particular level of professionalism that is necessary. Because you, of course, belong to a particular profession that people still look up to. People still believe that you have a particular level of knowledge that they don't possess. And equally, then it presents to you an added responsibility to act in a very professional manner. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, I think it would be amiss of me not to mention the fact that we have had problems with the profession. We've had, for example, before the introduction of the Independent Legal Services Commission, something like over 320 cases before the Law Society, the then Law Society. When I say cases, I mean complaints. Many of them actually had been languishing before the Law Society without any proper remedies or even address being given to the complainants. The Independent Legal Services Commission was, of course, set up in 2009, which created a separate entity to be able to independently assess any complaints that are made against lawyers. This actually was modeled along the systems that existed in Queensland. In fact, the definition of professional misconduct was borrowed directly from Queensland. The infrastructure, the soft structure around the setting up of the ILSC was borrowed from New South Wales. And we then saw, of course, a number of complaints being lodged. And since its creation, I've got the statistics here, since then there have been many cases of lawyers being fined, suspended, even disbarred for professional misconduct. Between 2009 and 2017, there have been a total of 2,481 complaints received by the Legal Practitioners Unit. 96 cases were brought before ILSC, of which 39 were successfully prosecuted, 11 lawyers have been suspended, and 5 have been disbarred. Some of them, of course, have been disbarred for life. Now, predominantly, actually, if you look at it, the reality is that, as I was talking to a group of accountants a few days ago, they, of course, need to also have a similar complaint mechanism because we also have a lot of complaints against accountants too. They may, and some may argue, that the level of fiduciary duty that they have, or that they don't have, probably they need to have. Because the level of fiduciary that lawyers have actually is quite high. And it is actually accepted. It's been through the centuries also. But accountants don't necessarily have to do that. But the reason why there's now a clamour for accountants to also have an independent process to review complaints, assess complaints, and indeed perhaps prosecute accountants is because there is a diminishing position with the accountants in terms of their level of credibility, the level of faith in their profession. So similarly, it is very important for us as lawyers to have an independent process to ensure that we do actually adhere to particular standards that are acceptable not just in Fiji but other similar jurisdictions. To be able to restore, if you like, the level of integrity that is required for the profession. Very critical. Lawyers should not fear such an independent process. The process needs to be completely independent. This is why the Commissioner of the ILSC needs to be independent. This is why the Commission of the ILSC must not fraternize with the legal profession as such. Because if you do have the breakdown of the Chinese wall, then it will actually lead to a diminution in the dignity that the ILSC itself should have. It's very important for us to understand that. There are many people, for example, who have been prosecuted, people who have been disbarred actually. The moment that actually happened, 3/4 of the lawyers that I knew in the profession said, that's a very good thing, because this guy was actually cooking the system. And even if you look at the complaints, fundamentally majority of the complaints were to do with trust fund accounts, trust fund monies. That brings me to the point about the business aspect of running a legal profession. It feeds in very well with that. And the reason I want to talk about that is because many lawyers, whilst being professional, you need to understand that you need to run your practice like a business. You need to pay yourself a salary. You need to understand the demarcation between money that is yours and money that is not yours. Money that is entrusted to you to actually hold. Now, we've heard numerous complaints. I can give you numerous examples of that. So, essentially, again, we see that sometimes it's not necessarily because lawyers have a deliberate intent to defraud their clients per se, but in fact, do not manage their funds well. So sometimes the question of, well, the money is sitting there, I need to meet the costs of perhaps paying for my staff's salary, so I'll just take a little bit of money from here, use it for the next few months, and I'll put the money back. Of course, generally, putting back the money gets forgotten. Again, not necessarily deliberately, but perhaps by matter of course, because you do forget, because the nature of the practice is such. So I think we need to be able to understand that when you run a legal profession, we need to be able to understand that you also need to run it as a professional. You have certain duties to the court, you have duties to your clients. Indeed, you have a duty to uphold the law. There is also a third element of your duty or responsibility. But the other aspect, of course, you need to be able to run your profession as a business. Generally in Fiji, you see most law firms are either single practitioner law firms, or now we've seen a growth as we now, when I get applications for trust fund accounts, there's generally 2 or 3 people now coming together to form a law firm. Now, the reality though is there's also a lack of specialization in Fiji. Most law firms actually, from what we can see, are scrambling for the same group of clients. So, there is, from a business perspective, the inability of a lot of lawyers to be able to enter the legal profession, the legal marketplace, and say, how will I, or how will my firm distinguish itself from the other one? That, I think, that sort of nous, that way of thinking about the legal market is not necessarily happening. 1 or 2 law firms have done it. Why do you think 1 or 2 law firms always get all the overseas trademark applications? Because maybe they've got a very good website. Maybe they know how to target, which markets to target. As you know, there's no restriction now on advertising also. I've never seen a law firm actually advertising openly in Fiji. There's no restriction on you. But the reality is that many law firms aren't able to think in a business-like way. The economy has now been growing consecutively for the past 8 years. It's unprecedented. What does that mean? It means there are numerous commercial opportunities for many law firms. For decades in Fiji, only 1 or 2 law firms took the cream of the market. For decades in Fiji, only 1 or 2 law firms got all the state-owned enterprise legal work, or the large corporate legal work. Now that really should change. The young lawyers, you have a great opportunity. You're a lot more technologically savvy than most of the other seniors of yours. You should be able to take advantage of that. You should be able to position and market yourself in a particular niche within the economy that will make you attractive. There are no specialist infrastructure lawyers in Fiji. Government has been spending this year alone in the budget. We have nearly $600 million alone given to FRA. We have literally dozens and dozens and dozens of contracts being generated between contractors, subcontractors, sub-subcontractors. We have enormous levels of commercial activity. How are you positioning yourself within this economic framework? How are you able to market yourselves and run your operations as a business, but at the same time using your specialized skill sets and technical know-how to not only further the development of jurisprudence in these specialist areas of the law, which in fact I can tell you in many areas the jurisprudence in Fiji is very, very little, underdeveloped. So as a professional you can contribute to the development of jurisprudence, but also as a professional running and owning a business, how are you marketing yourself, reaching out to a particular category of clients, new clients? The World Bank has signed an agreement with the Fijian government. By March of next year, there will be something like 23 new personnel in Fiji. About 15 of them probably would be expatriates. They not only come and lease our homes and hire apartments and hire people and buy cars, etc., but they will also be able, they will need lawyers to give them legal advice in respect of the work they will be doing in the region. Fiji has now become the hub. How are we as Fijian lawyers providing the level of profession, the skill sets that's required? It's very important. Another basic business principle which I think also fits in with the issue of professionalism. I was up in Singatoka Valley about 3 weeks ago, or 2.5 weeks ago, on a very cold Saturday night, and I went to a cultural gathering there. And around about 1 a.m. in the morning, I had a lot of people coming over to me and talking to me about their personal problems, issues. A brother and sister came to me and they said that they had been to one of the law firms. We tend to find this happens with the smaller towns, smaller jurisdictions. For the past 7 years, they have paid fees to a law firm simply to have a freehold land of theirs subdivided to be put under the individual names. To date, ladies and gentlemen, to date, they are yet to meet the lawyer. To date, they've only met the clerks. $7,000 later in fees, they are yet to meet the lawyer. Forget the fiduciary aspect of it. Purely from a business perspective, is that a good business practice? If somebody is going to give me $7,000, I want to come and shake their hands. I want to be able to ensure that I say to somebody, even myself, give them a cup of tea. Now I think what has actually happened, the monies have been put in a trust fund account. The registration has still not been done, the subdivision has not happened. Now they're asking them for more money. They said, well, actually you have to get a valuation done on the land, only then we can do the subdivision. It's freehold land. You see, so it kind of just continues. It multiplies because of the inability as a business person to be able to provide that level of service to your client, and the moment you stop doing that, you will fall into this abyss, frankly. Very hard to extricate yourself from that, unless you take some decisive steps. Unless you actually say, look, we've goofed up, let's move along and I can provide these sorts of remedies for you, this sort of redress for you. So purely from a business perspective, actually, it is not good business practice. I've actually got a list of areas that generally don't talk about businesses in this fashion. Implementation of business principles improves the profession of law as it encourages responsiveness to consumers, that I mentioned. Greater competition in the legal sector, improving access to justice by lowering of prices and increasing quality. Boosting of profits of law firms as they reduce overheads through use of technology. Lawyers must instill business discipline by, for example, like I said, paying themselves a proper salary, filing their tax returns on time, filing their VAT returns on time. There's been a lot of breaches in that. Better marketing, more transparent billing processes, again is critical. We need to have in 21st century Fiji, 21st century legal profession in Fiji, we need to have better transparency in the way that we have cost letters issued. Do you have standardized cost letters in your firm? What is the billing process? Is it transparent? Do you send the bill as and when you feel like it, or do you do it every 30 days? I mean, you can buy software off the shelf now. It's very, very easy to do that. Better communication with clients. Again, it sort of falls into the area of fiduciary duty, but also as a business practice, it's a good thing to do. You distinguish yourself from the rest of the practitioners. I've got you using dedicated accounting software and embracing technology, such as paperless office initiatives. So these are some of the critical issues that I think perhaps that we can discuss today and tomorrow that can hopefully help you focus and hone in those areas that will help you as a professional person and also as a professional person who wants to run a successful business. I would like to take this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, before I round off, to also please highlight to you that we also, I think, as a professional body, as a professional group of people, I should say, have certain obligations to the law. One very basic one, which we have been actually trying to get the legal profession to participate in, is to do some pro bono work. A lot of lawyers in Fiji have actually spoken about, sometimes eloquently, sometimes not so eloquently, perhaps more the latter at times, about the rule of law. Not necessarily understanding the basic principles of what the rule of law means. They've spoken about human rights. Fundamentally in Fiji, if you look at the discourse on human rights, it's always generally focused on civil and political rights for a number of decades, to the neglect of socio-economic rights. Again, it has been a dichotomous approach to rights. But as mentioned a couple of days ago, they both are critically important. You can have all the civil and political rights built in, but if you do not have people who don't have the fundamental right to food, to shelter, access to water, access to justice, access to education, and they get continuously marginalized, that could fundamentally always lead to, as seen in many other countries, a breakdown of the civil and political situation in any country. Socio-economic rights are very, very critical. Many countries, for example, countries like Singapore, have argued that they like to focus more on socio-economic rights. Perhaps some may argue to the detriment of civil and political rights. Other countries, of course, have focused. One extreme example could be USA. Civil and political rights to the detriment of socio-economic rights. It's one of the most unequal societies in the world today. If you look at the Gini coefficient, inequality in fact has grown. Even in countries like Australia and New Zealand, if you look at the Gini coefficient, the latest figures that reveal, inequality actually has grown in those countries. Fiji, out of the Asia-Pacific grouping, is one of the 5 countries where inequality has actually dropped. But my point being that when you talk about rights, we need to be able to address both the aspects of rights. Socio-economic rights are just as equal. A person living in the interior of Natasiri, a person living in some remote village in the northern tip of Kandavu, a cane farmer who is drinking water out of the creek till today, must be able to enjoy, and we must be able to understand what day-to-day issues are facing them. It's not simply about civil and political rights per se. In the same way, ladies and gentlemen, if we are actually adherents of civil and political rights, it is actually quite saddening to see when we started the pro bono process, in particular the first hour procedure, no lawyers from the private practice, or very few, actually came forward to be put in the roster system. When Legal Aid went out and asked lawyers to actually offer their services, we talk about persons in detention, about the ability not to be tortured, about the ability not to have evidence extricated from them through illegal means. All of us need to be able to participate in the system to ensure that those infringements do not take place. We all have a responsibility to do that. Today, the Fijian government is giving in excess of $5.2 million to the Legal Aid Commission. The Legal Aid Commission is the largest law firm in Fiji now. There's about 45 lawyers. We have legal aid offices in far-flung places like Nambuwalu, Kandavu, Ovalau, Rotuma, various other places, all over Fiji. Every major urban center actually has a legal aid office. But it is still not enough. We've also now outsourcing work to the private practitioners, where we have conflict cases, where we do, of course, domestic matters, maintenance matters, custody matters. And when both the parties actually qualify to get legal aid, and if the legal aid, for example, is representing the wife, and we need legal representation for the husband, we found legal practitioners, even though they'd be paid for it, actually refusing to take work. So I would use this platform, ladies and gentlemen, to urge you, please, contact legal aid. Offer your services in the first hour procedure. It may be only once a week. It could be once every fortnight. In some cases, maybe once a month. But you'll be able to provide a particular level of redress to that individual. There's no point talking about rights when those rights are going to be only limited to those people who actually have money. There are many people who are low-income people who need access to justice, who need legal representation. In the same way, many people in Fiji till today think that wills should only be made for those people who are rich. This is why legal aid now drafts wills for low-income people. We've seen so many people come up to our office. My father left us a house, the mother is still alive, and 5 brothers are there. They're all fighting over it because there is no will. So even if it's a single property, there are many such issues that exist in our society. And I think, I'm not asking you all of you to, suddenly become completely altruistic and give up everything and give up your nice lifestyles. But there is a small element of your practice that you can actually dedicate to help improve and bring about substantive justice. Make some fundamental changes by just dedicating a couple of hours of your time once a month or once a fortnight. I'd like to very quickly and lastly also just highlight to you in terms of the Accident Compensation Act. As you know that that's now law. We're in the process of appointing the commissioners for the new commission. It's modeled along the New Zealand ACC. And of course we look forward to this actually being implemented from January of next year. Those of you who actually may have derived an income from third-party insurance claims may suddenly feel a little bit of a pinch. But the reality is that it's actually good for the system. The reality is, and I don't have to tell you this, there are also opportunities that actually develop because of the fact that we're setting up the commission. The other important law that I'd like to also bring to your attention, ladies and gentlemen, is, and I need to get the technical term for that, is to do with personal property. And I hope some of you have actually made the submissions on that. And this is to do with the national registration of the Personal Property Securities Bill. That's before the committee. I understand they've already compiled the report, and we hope that Parliament will actually approve it in the next session of Parliament. This will fundamentally change the manner in which a lot of you do your business. And I urge you to please read this bill. It should become an act in the next couple of weeks, and get on board on this. Those of you who will actually get on board with this particular law, you can also have business opportunities for yourself and also for your clients. It creates a lot of commercial activities for people who currently do not have those commercial opportunities. It creates also a lot of legal work also for you to be able to talk to the various financial companies, and I urge you to do that. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to finish off there, and hopefully the comments that I've made, in fact, has provided some food for thought. I do not want to come here and give a lecture as such on a particular specialized topic area, but I want to provide some food for thought, which because I saw your program, and hopefully they can feed into some of the discussions you will have, because there is no doubt there is a lot of scope for the legal profession to run very good businesses. You can actually make lots of money. You just need to become smarter, You need to also be able to, at the same time, run your organization professionally as a business organization, but also professionally in the traditional sense of the word, where you have those certain fiduciary duties. And you will find, I think, that if you have the business discipline to your practice, you'll be able to fulfill your fiduciary duty a lot better. And I think that's very, very critical to understand. And somebody said to me, who came from overseas, and said, you know, because of the fact that you have so many general practitioners in Fiji, it seems to be that all jacks of all trade but master of none. Maybe there are some people who are like that, and maybe there is actually a particular niche for them, and maybe, for example, in a small town like Sigatoka, that may be the way to go. But that still does not mean that many of you actually cannot necessarily specialize in one or two areas, be able to market yourselves on that basis, become a lot more technologically savvy. The Honourable Chief Justice, the Chief Registrar, they're looking at things like, you know, e-filing. There's a number of technological changes that will also be made in government systems. Please get on board with that. It will make your life a lot easier. It will also make the court's life a lot more easier. And also we'll be able to get a lot more efficiency within the system. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to finish off then. I'd like to thank once again the President for the invitation, and I wish you all a very good morning. Thank you very much.